Hello, good afternoon. So, I wanted to talk more about hormones and weight gain or the hormones that are not allowing you to lose weight. This is a really layered topic. So, I want to make sure that we give it the space it needs. So today in my members only group, we're doing our live coaching call. It's supposed to be at noon, but I thought what I would do is hop on here and talk a little bit about weight management and hormones that are influenced or hormones that influence weight and the different pieces to weight. And then I'm for my members only live coaching session. We're going to really get into kind of the workshop aspect of, for example, things you can actually do. But here I just want to make sure I'm giving a full overview and educating you on those pieces. Now, if you want to join our members community, there's a 2-week free trial. So a couple things I want to mention before I dive in. There's a lot of new members here. So I want to just talk about how to navigate. There is a lot of resources about how to navigate this group in general. Check out the welcome and the featured pages. Also, I've talked about it in a few videos, but I just want to kind of recap that there is kind of member ranking. So in this free group, there's member ranking, meaning if you ask someone to join. So if you go to the left-hand side of your screen, whether you are on a phone or a computer, there is a button that says invite. The invite button is your link that you can send to anyone to get them to join this free group. And if they join with your link, you get kind of a point. And so for anyone who refers 2 people with their link, they will get a status of bronze membership, and then you'll get silver, and then you'll get gold. So based on your referrals. So if you refer 2 people, you will automatically be bronze membership, which gives you 3 months free of my members kind of community. If you just want to sign up on your own, there is a 2-week free trial for anyone. So if you want that 3 months, you just have to refer 2 people to the free group. So super easy to get for 3 months free in that group. And like I said, everybody gets 2 weeks free. So if you're interested in this information and kind of what to do further, make sure you join the members only group because I'm going to hop on there next. Okay, let's get started. If you hop on in the middle of this, it will be recorded and it will be posted. And if you can't hop on live, that's cool too. But we're going to talk about weight. And so I want to just break it down into the pieces I'm going to address today because it is a very complex topic. But I have a lot of conversations with women specifically who will come see me and say, I need to lose X amount of pounds. And if you know me or you've talked to me, you know that I don't work in a practice that way because I think there's a lot more to, I know there's a lot more to health than just losing a number on the scale. But it's important to look at all of the factors that really go into weight so that you understand from a holistic perspective how we should approach it. Because I can tell you right now, if you're eating 1,200 calories a day, doing meal replacement shakes, you're going to lose weight. But are you going to keep it off? No, probably not. And are you going to wreck your metabolism? Probably. So I want to educate you on all of those pieces so that you can further take that information and decide what to do with it. So let's just talk about the things I'm going to talk about today, just as an overview. I'm going to talk about insulin. I'm going to talk about leptin. I'm going to talk about the gut microbiome, and we'll just kind of see where we go from there. I do have another video where I talk about insulin. I talk about thyroid, I believe. I talk about cortisol, I believe. I don't remember the video specifically, but I've spoken about these topics. So if you're looking for that, look for that other video. But today I really want to talk more about insulin, leptin, the microbiome, some more intense topics, more, I guess, nuanced topics. So the first thing to remember and understand is that leptin is your satiety hormone. So leptin is the hormone that your body will secrete when you are full. So you're going to eat a meal, your body will make leptin. That's going to tell your brain, we're done eating, we're no longer hungry. And so this plays a part in weight because we need leptin to tell us that we are not hungry anymore, or else we're still going to be hungry. And we look at balancing hormones called leptin and ghrelin. So leptin is the satiety hormone. Ghrelin, I think of it like grr, your stomach's growling, as the hunger hormone. And so these are really important to make sure that they're balanced, because if your ghrelin is really high, you're going to be hungry all the time. If your leptin is low, you don't have that satiety hormone. But there's another piece. So there is some individuals who will get what's called leptin deficiency. And this can happen typically in these individuals, they will be hungry all the time and they end up being obese. However, the majority of people are actually leptin resistant. So similar to insulin resistance, it's like when we're making too much insulin, but our cells aren't responding to it. This is the same as leptin resistance. So leptin goes up to the point where it's making us feel satiated. And then we get past that point of like no return, where now your body's just not responding to it. So now you're just making a ton of leptin. This can easily be diagnosed by doing a blood test. You can look to see if your leptin is too high, because if your leptin's too high, then you are probably leptin resistant. And that is a reason for your inability to lose weight. Okay, so leptin is also secreted by your fat tissue, and it is directly related to the amount of body fat. Again, as your fat tissue increases, the amount of leptin will increase, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to respond to that. Okay. There's a lot of, I wanted to go into some research I found on weight, because I found it to be very interesting. So basically, the research that I was looking at the other day when it came to weight, because I had someone comment on my TikTok how they have been kind of yo-yo dieting. They eat a low amount of calories and they still can't lose weight. And so the research that I looked into actually found this energy compensation theory. And so what happens is overall, the body will always adjust for a low caloric intake. So for example, every single day, unless you are tracking things very specifically, every single day you're going to be eating a variety of calories. So maybe one day you ate, I don't know, 1,500. Next day you ate 1,700. Next day you ate 1,300. Next day you had 2,000. Like things change, right? Depending, like if it's a weekend, if you're going for a big dinner, if you're drinking alcohol, like those pieces play a role. And your body has an energy compensation kind of rule. And so what happens is, in a study where they did covert energy restriction. So what does that mean? It means basically in the study, they're giving you a meal and it's covert. So you don't know that the calories are restricted in it, but they are. And so what happens in this case is they're feeding you a meal. It's lower in calories. And so this covert energy restriction was followed by like regular eating. So they had these people, they fed them a low energy or low calorie meal. And what happened in 100% of the time, or the majority of the time, is these individuals actually had, when allowed to eat a regular amount, they actually had a 100% energy compensation. Meaning if they gave you a 1,300 calorie meal and you're supposed to eat like, I don't know, let's say 1,700 calories to be balanced, what's going to happen is you're now going to eat the 1,700 calories plus the ones that you missed out on in the other day. Meaning if you're not actually monitoring, or you just monitor sometimes, or in the event where you, like for individuals who do a restricted diet throughout the week, and then on the weekends, maybe they have a cheat day where they don't track anything. When we look at what the research says, it says that if you were to do that cheat day and not actually track it, when you're tracking the rest as extreme energy restriction, you're going to be more likely to 100% compensate. And then your weight is either just going to not change, or it's going to maybe modestly increase. So that is one of the risks, is that we just compensate for what we're eating or what we're not eating. The other piece is changes in your metabolic rate. So they did one study, and they did, for one day, women either fasted, consumed 1,200 calories, or ate normally. And then for the 4 days after that, they ate freely chosen meals. So they found that, so versus women who ate 1,200 calories, women who fasted, and women who just ate normally. So they found that the body weight decreased in women after fasting or restricting the diet And then when they were allowed to eat normally, the body weight that was lost was regained in 4 days. This is exactly what I'm talking about. When we eat 1,200 calories or we do something that's not sustainable, you are going to gain it all back. And typically you might gain back more. So, the interesting thing about this study, we talk about like gaining it all back. And then some people say, well, what if I just really track what I do? Then I'm not going to gain it all back. In this specific study, they found that the women after the 4 days of restriction, so they did 4 days of, again, fasting, 1,200 calories or eating freely. So the fasting, and I believe it was like a complete fasting, not intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is different, but typically in intermittent fasting, you're actually consuming the same amount of calories, but they're just in a different window. So you're just altering your metabolic state in that way. You're not necessarily restricting. And if you are restricting, you should take a look at how much you're restricting. But anyways, completely fasting, so like a serious fast, where typically like a fast that you'll see in a study is, I don't know, some studies do like a water fast. Sometimes they'll add like 500 calories. It depends on what the actual fast is. My point is it's a restrictive diet in this case. So they looked at the fasting, the 1,200 calories, and the eating freely. So basically what happened is in that kind of 4 days after they were able to eat normally again, they actually didn't eat any more food. They said there was no increase in the amount of food eaten. It appeared that reducing food intake actually decreased the metabolic rate and ensured the recovery of body weight. So again, I talk about these compensatory mechanisms that your body does. When you eat a low amount of food or too little calories, your body's going to say, we're obviously not getting enough energy. How do we protect the body from going into starvation? And at that point, what they'll do is they'll just pull back on your metabolic rate. So now your metabolism goes down so that you can still eat less, but now it's not even going to serve you, right? So you were eating less before. And in the beginning, you notice this weight loss. And then you get to a point where you're like, I've plateaued or I've gained weight, or you have individuals who will do yo-yo dieting throughout their life. And this is what we find. Their metabolism is slower and it becomes a lot harder to work with later in life. So this is why I urge my patients who are doing things like isogenics or Herbalife. There's a lot of ones like this where we're doing meal replacements and we're doing a lot of powdered things, that we need to be really careful that we're not putting ourselves in a disastrous state for our metabolism in general. So the study suggested that failure to maintain a reduced body weight does not necessarily reflect an increase in appetite or a raised food intake, rather physiological mechanisms that have important roles. If calorie intake is reduced, the body compensates by decreasing a metabolic rate or stimulating food intake. So, I mean, if your mental willpower doesn't allow you to increase eating, then it's going to bring down your metabolic rate. I found this study really interesting talking about dieting, and they found that after 1 year of dieting, the levels of leptin, peptide YY, cholecystokinin, insulin, ghrelin, gastric inhibitory peptide, and pancreatic peptide have been found to differ from baseline values. This concluded that diet-induced weight loss results in long-term changes in appetite, gut hormones, favoring increased appetite and weight regain. So again, we're impacting hormones, not just sex hormones. I think we think of hormones in the way of like insulin and progesterone and estrogen and testosterone, but we really need to look at other hormones, leptin and ghrelin, and a lot of the hormones that are in our gut that impact weight regulation and appetite regulation. When food intake was restricted, the resulting loss of body fat was associated with a decrease in the production of body heat and a reduction of metabolic rate, changes that will facilitate a return to the initial weight. Again, like I said, we reduce that caloric intake too much, it's going to make our body go back on us. It's going to make our body reduce the amount of heat it produces. So it's going to reduce that calorie burn. We know when we get hot, we're going to burn calories. So it reduces that calorie burn and it reduces your metabolic rate so that we can no longer burn calories. So then you keep eating less and less and less. And now you're in this spiral. And now you're probably not eating enough to make things like thyroid hormones and things like that. So this study looked at long-term consequences of low-calorie diets, and they found that 1/3 and 2/3 of dieters regained more weight than they had lost initially, Weight cycling or yo-yo dieting refers to a cycle of weight loss followed by regaining the lost weight, followed by again dieting, and so on. They basically said this initially during dieting, the energy expenditure of muscles reduces. Then when more food becomes available, the thrifty body favors depositing fat. So this is why oftentimes if you're the type of person who's yo-yo dieted your entire life, you're like always on the next diet, your body is protecting. Your body has these protective mechanisms that stop against weight gain. One thing I found really interesting, this fun fact, based on what the average American eats and burns each year, calories alone without I can't say this word, compensatory mechanisms. Like, I don't know what's going on. It would result in an increase of weight approaching 100 pounds. So what I'm saying is based on what the average American consumes and what the average American burns, you should actually be gaining about 100 pounds a year. Okay. And so the reason why we don't do this is because of these mechanisms that our body kind of adjusts and adapts and all of these pieces. And so most people on average gain weight over time, and it's about a pound or less a year. So this is about 9 extra calories a day. So you think about that and you're like, wow, that's actually like our body's actually keeping us level more than it's keeping us kind of at an increased body weight. And this is, keep in mind, if you're eating like the average person and you're not doing these things to worsen your situation. So like I said, yo-yo dieting or excuse me, under eating, under nutrition is going to put your body into that state of making sure that they're kind of like compensating for that, right? Okay. Other pieces I wanted to talk about is sleep. I wanted to talk a little bit about, hold on, I just have a ton of notes here. Artificial sweeteners are interesting, but I feel like they are a topic kind of on their own. We could go into artificial sweeteners in general. But somebody did ask a question about the gut microbiome and how to know if gut played a role in weight. So I think we should spend some time there because there is a lot to that. So, and the question was around like, how do we know? And yeah, I think that was kind of the question. So let's just talk about the microbes in the gut. I love talking about the gut microbiome as it pertains to hormone health because this is something less obvious that people don't really realize is that the gut plays roles in hormone health. The gut plays roles in weight. And so when patients or people see me in one of my programs or membership, they'll often say like, but I have gut issues. Do you do that too? And I'm like, yes, that is foundationally part of treating your hormonal health. And so this is part of my programs. And this is why I always incorporate gut health and the microbiome in every circumstance. We can just look at it a little bit differently and we can just look at the research a little bit differently as it pertains to that. So first thing I want to highlight is that microbes in the human intestine impact the absorption, breakdown, storage of nutrients, and have potential consequences on your physiology. So we know that overuse of antibiotics has been linked to obesity. We know that gut dysbiosis, so meaning like an overgrowth or like dysbiosis is like overgrowth of some things. And I mean, dysbiosis can really just be lots of bad things, not enough good things. Like it's just out of whack. Can actually promote overgrowth of pathogenic organisms that cause chronic inflammation. Again, we go inflammation can cause a role or play a role in the onset of obesity, insulin resistance, blood pressure, diabetes. They all kind of come hand in hand. A healthy balance in the microbiome plays a role in preventing or alleviating obesity and metabolic diseases. And the other piece, before I go into more details, I want you to understand is that the gut is known as the second brain. So your microbiome is influenced by a number of things. I could talk about the microbiome for 2 hours, just specifically that. So here I'm just hitting points that have to do with obesity and the inability to lose weight rather. The microbiome is influenced by the way in which you're delivered. So birth mode, so C-section versus vaginal, dietary habits, use of antibiotics, aging, other environmental factors. Now, a few things that are super interesting is that obese subjects tend to have higher amounts of firmicutes species. So firmicutes are a type of bacteria, and they also are shown to have a higher firmicute to bacteroidetes ratio. Now, I'm going to butcher pronouncing all of these bacteria names, but I just want you to understand the purpose behind what I'm saying. When we do a test, it's called the GI map. This is the one I run with my patients in my practice. We can actually measure the level of firmicutes and that compared to bacteroidetes. So it's a really cool marker and something that we can tangibly see. Oh, this is going to cause a problem with weight. So specifically with firmicutes or firmicutes or however you pronounce the word, it is, and I will see if I can write it in the chat. I don't know if this stays when I record it, but for anybody who's here live, that's what it is. So firmicutes have been shown to be negatively proportional to resting energy expenditure. What does that mean? If there's a negative correlation, it means when firmicutes are high, the factor or the marker that we're comparing it to is low. So if it's negatively proportional to resting energy expenditure, that's the resting amount of calories you're burning. So firmicutes would be high and resting energy expenditure or the calories you're burning at rest would be low. So the higher it goes, the lower amount of calories you are burning. They did some studies on rats, which is really interesting, but I wanted to highlight one thing that they did in mice. So they had mice and they fed them a high-fat diet and a high sucrose diet, so high sugar diet. All of these mice were obese. They did this for 13 weeks. During the last 4 weeks of the intervention, they actually were being given probiotics, which had a Lactobacillus acidophilus, a Bifidobacterium longum, Enterococcus faecalis, at a 1:1:1 ratio. And they actually found that during this intervention of 13 weeks, the first 9 weeks, these mice actually increased in body weight. But once the probiotics were introduced, weight gain slowed in both groups, which is super, super interesting. So basically, the probiotics alleviated for the problems that happened with the weight gain. Studies have also found that high-fat diets decrease the diversity of the gut microbiome. So we looked at a high-fat diet, we looked at a high-carb diet, and the high-fat diet decreased the diversity. So there was less diversity in the microbiome. We know that to be a problem. But a high-carb diet actually changed the structure of the bacteria related to obesity. So they found that in the high-carb diet, they actually had more obesity-related bacteria. In the high fat diet, they just had less favorable bacteria. So we can see that the changes happen when we're taking out macronutrients in general. Like I look at this, a high fat diet, a high carb diet as just reducing macronutrients, right? We're like skewing our diet in one way or another. But we see how this has impacts to your gut, your microbiome. So with the carbs actually increase the amount of obesity related bacteria, but the fat reduced some of our good bacteria. So there's definitely a balance to be had with having fat, fiber, protein, and carbohydrates, right? We need to kind of have them all. In human studies, they found that having a diverse microbiome, and I always talk about this, if you're in any of my groups or you are a patient of mine, you know that I can't talk today. Microbial diversity shows a preventative effect on long-term weight gain in healthy individuals. I talk about microbial diversity a lot. And what does this mean? It means not eating the same thing every day. We can eat healthy things all the time. And I give the example of someone sees me, they have the same smoothie every morning. And for lunch, they have chicken and salad with tomatoes and cucumber, olive oil, and balsamic. And for dinner, they have, I don't know, let's say like a little bit of rice, sweet potato, and I don't know, fish, let's just say. And that's their healthy diet. And that is a healthy diet. It's a very balanced diet. But when it's the same thing over and over, we're impacting our microbial diversity. And when we do that, we're going to have more of a risk of gaining weight. Going back to the firmicutes and bacteroidetes, looking at subjects. So they looked at obese individuals and they found that there was a correlation between having more firmicutes and less bacteroidetes in obesity. They also found, again, the diversity of the microbiome. So it's all about eating different things to impact your microbiome. The last thing I wanted to talk about was short chain fatty acids. So Short chain fatty acids are basically made by certain things you eat. So when we break down fibers, we make short chain fatty acids, and they have actually been shown to help with weight management as well. So, short chain fatty acids have been found to strengthen the intestinal barrier, to reduce inflammation, and they have a positive effect on lipid metabolism. So, things like cholesterol as well. Short chain fatty acids can also regulate satiety, so those feelings of feeling full, as well as reduce your appetite. And so, typically, like, what do you do for testing and understanding if you have this ratio? I would say to seek out a GI map test to understand what your microbiome looks like, because when we have a targeted approach, we can actually impact it if you have overgrowth. And then after we work through that plan of getting rid of it, or after you work through it, depending on where you're located, then you can get to a point where now you're at a maintenance phase. But all this to say is that your gut plays a role in the inability to lose weight, or the fact that you are gaining weight, seeming to no end. So this is a really important thing to consider. I do a GI map in my patients. We look at the microbiome. We see what bacteria is impacting what. Now, from a specifically hormone perspective, we have markers that will impact your hormones, the recycling of your hormones, et cetera, et cetera. We have inflammatory markers, but we also look at all of your bacteria, including things like the firmicutes ratio is actually measured in that test. So that can let you know if that might be contributing, because it's not a contributing factor in all individuals, but it certainly can be a contributing factor in some. So that's an important thing to note. So that's what I wanted to say here with respect to hormones and weight, just to finish that conversation of that first piece. How do you know if it's your gut? Honestly, if you have digestive issues, I would imagine that's part of the picture. And by digestive issues, I mean you have heartburn, you don't have a bowel movement every day, like anything that would indicate things are off. But you could still have normal bowel movements and have a microbiome that isn't ideal. So probiotics might be a good way. If you don't have significant enough digestive issues that you want to invest in something like a GI map, probiotics could be a helpful intervention to help with your entire weight loss plan. I'm going to be really clear though, it's not going to be, I'm not saying here that adding in probiotics are going to help you lose 10 pounds, but I think adding in specific probiotics could be helpful. And I just want to end by showing you, I have see if I can share my screen, but there is a table summary of the research as it pertains to. So I don't know if this is actually being shared, but I don't know. This share screen button doesn't really. Okay. Anyways, it's the share screen button doesn't work for me, so I don't know what's happening there. But what I want to say is, in summary, basically we had a study that looked at the effect of probiotics on body weight and sugar control, and they found significant reductions in body weight, BMI, insulin levels in the probiotic group. Another study looked at probiotic supplementation on inflammation and metabolic syndrome. This study also found reduction in weight gain and beneficial effect on insulin, inflammatory markers, and leptin, which I talked about leptin and leptin resistance. Another study looked at dietary therapy to alter the function and composition of microbes, and they found in the group with probiotics, they had increased 2 butyrate producing families. So I mentioned short chain fatty acids. That's butyrate is part of that. So we increased butyrate, which is a really good thing. One study looked at bifidobacterium. So these are specific strains. So the rest of the studies here looked at specific strains. I'm happy to take a screenshot and post it in the group so it's easier. I think that'll be the best thing so you guys can take a look at it. But there was some specific strains and they had specific outcomes. So for example, like Akkermansia improved insulin resistance. And so if you're looking for a probiotic, it's important to not only look for the proper product, but also the strain. Like we want to have a good quality product, but we also want to have the proper strain. So looking at not just getting a generic one if you're looking to get probiotics for these specific treatment options. Okay, I'm going to pop into my members only group because we are talking about how to implement, how to fix leptin resistance, how to go into increasing short chain fatty acids, and all of these pieces, kind of like the how-tos. So if you are not in that members group, you can join with a 2-week free trial. Like I mentioned at the beginning, if you are not a member and you refer 2 people to this free group, so meaning go to the left side of your screen, you'll see a menu. If you hit invite, that is your link. You send that to anyone. You have 2 people that join with your link. You will automatically be given like a bronze status, and you'll get 3 months free to the membership. But if you join right now, you have 2 weeks free anyways. So that's where I'm going right now to chat about kind of like what we can do next in our next steps. So I hope everyone has a good day. I'll post that chart in the group to give you more context, and post your questions below.